if you've spent any time on TikTok or Instagram lately, you've probably seen a slammed city golf or polo crawling around a speed hump. The rapid growth of stance culture in the last few years has meant that what some people may view as an impractical headache, others view as a form of style and self-expression. So let's dive into that by having a conversation. Let's talk about stance cars in South Africa, figure out why people modify their cars the way that they do, and explore the problems that come part and parcel with this subculture. I think the main reason for the South African stance community being that the way that it is nowadays is TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. According to ByteDance, the company that owns TikTok, there are approximately 17.46 million South Africans on TikTok aged 18 and above as of 2024. There are also 6.95 and 26 million South Africans on Instagram and Facebook respectively. So from these stats, we can kind of see that these are the social media platforms that the majority of 90s and 2000s babies are on. So they tend to have a large impact on the cultural zeitgeist within these two generations, within the 90s and 2000s generation. And because these platforms tend to be heavily skewed towards visually impressive content, they encourage the creation of aesthetically pleasing photos and videos. And there's not much more visually impressive to a young gent from the Kasi than a slammed city golf slicing a speed hump. So then this affinity towards nice looking cars, predominantly from young males, ends up creating a feedback loop where every time someone posts their slam car on social media, they end up getting a ton of likes, which obviously incentivizes them to create more content and modify their car more, which gets them even more like, and so on and so forth, until it eventually snowballs into a respectable following. You end up with a situation where the algorithms of these social media platforms are actually accelerating the growth of this culture by pushing more of this type of content out, which is obviously going to lead to a lot of people wanting to join in on the new trend that's happening because of the social media platforms kind of pushing the content out. It's going to lead to people wanting to join in on the trend because number one, they see the amount of clout that they can get by just cutting up their springs and slicing a speed hump, and number two, they might genuinely be falling in love with the culture that is developing off the back of the clout and want to be a part of it. That's honestly why I think stance cars are so popular nowadays in South Africa. It is a cheap way to modify your car, get a ton of clout on your socials, and join a community that genuinely seems like it's really cool to be a part of. It seems like a really loving and caring community. It is kind of a win-win situation. Well, kind of. We'll kind of get into that a bit later on, but it does seem like there are no disadvantages to taking part in this dance culture. Optimal distinctiveness is a psychology theory that basically describes how humans strive to balance the need to be a part of the group with the need of being unique. For us to fully understand how this theory works, I am going to tell you a story. See, last year when I was doing my first and kind of last year of varsity, if you know, you know. But yeah, last year when I first arrived in Joburg, my fashion sense was kind of non-existent. I would wear whatever was popular back in my area, which basically at the time boiled down to skinny jeans and an expensive branded t-shirt like Lacoste or Nike or whatever other kind of popular like name branded t-shirt. That was basically my fashion sense going into my first year of varsity. And I've always kind of been a chronically online person. I mean, even before I started this YouTube channel, even before I started the business, I was always just chronically online on YouTube, on Instagram. So I'd come across a lot of different styles of fashion, and there were some things that resonated with me that I wanted to try, but because of the area that I lived in, the rural area that I lived in, that I still live in now, but back at the time before I went to Joburg, it felt like this area was constricting me to whatever was popular here, and it was kind of frowned upon to stray too far from that kind of that proven path in a way. But when I got to Joburg, it was a much more freeing environment, as a lot of you guys will know. That transition from high school to varsity, there's a lot of freedom that happens between high school and varsity. And so when I got to an environment that was a lot more accepting of you experimenting more with your fashion sense, that's when I feel like my fashion sense personally, you know, changed drastically. And when my fashion sense started to slightly change and I started being like properly proud of what I was wearing and properly confident of myself. It did kind of feel like my fashion sense was developing in like a unique way, but the truth was that subconsciously I was being influenced, number one, by my surroundings, by seeing students on campus and my own personal friend group wear a certain way, and also seeing a lot of stuff on social media that influenced my choice a lot. And I ended up adapting a style that, yes, everyone around me was wearing, but it had a huge impact on me personally. I liked it personally and I felt like it resonated with my identity the most, so I chose that style. And I won't lie to you guys, I felt a great sense of individuality, even though if we boil it down to its simplest, I was just kind of following a trend. In the same ways, most stance builds are kind of unique, but they're only unique within the boundaries of the stance culture. You're standing out but still blending in a way. They definitely stand out from regular traffic, don't get me wrong, but they still conform to the confines of the stance culture and what is kind of currently relevant within the culture. I mean, actually think about it. If you live in the car seat, how many stance cars have you seen with chop springs, steel wheels, and a loud exhaust system, and probably an equally loud sound system as well? It's probably too many for you to even count. The owner still feels a great sense of individuality when driving the car, but the truth is that individuality in the stance culture is very much tied to what is popular in the culture at that time. The community celebrates builds that are unique but still adhere to certain aesthetic standards within the community. Kind of like how you can't run bags without skinny tires. It's a small example, but I think it represents the phenomena quite well. And I'm not saying that optimal distinctiveness is a bad thing. I mean, as you just saw, as you just heard, I partake in optimal distinctiveness on a daily basis. I just find it quite interesting how it became one of the main driving forces behind one of the biggest automotive communities in South Africa. And as beautiful of a thing as stance and the stance community is, and as beautiful as I've described it to be, it still doesn't exist in a vacuum. We inevitably have to ask the very first question that pops up in the minds of regular South Africans when they come across these cars on the road. Are stance cars just kind of very, very dumb in the context of this country? Well, let's find out. In reality, stance cars don't really hurt anyone or anything besides their owners' wallets. I mean, they are a bit of a safety risk because you are significantly altering your car's handling performance by doing stuff like lowering it or by putting it on bigger wheels, for example. But these cars are so few and far in between that these risks don't really pose any tangible danger to road users. Stance car drivers also tend to be extremely careful when driving their cars because South African roads are not exactly stance friendly, and one mistake could lead to a very expensive repair bill. The only main tangible issue that I see with these cars when it comes to affecting regular road users is inconvenience, especially when it comes to stuff like speed humps and potholes. I don't think I need to elaborate on this one. I think we all know what it feels like to wait behind a stance car as it dances around a speed hump at 8 in the morning. Yeah, I don't need to elaborate. I think we all feel that frustration. Another issue facing the stance community, an issue that isn't really that tangible, is how these cars are perceived in society. In society, stancing your car may seem like an impractical attempt at attention seeking and not you modifying your car because you genuinely want to out of the love that comes from your heart. It kind of seems like you're looking for attention with your loud exhaust tips and your cars that are too low and your loud sound system. I think we can see why that happens. The Rosas also give stance cars a special kind of scrutiny and look for any reason to impound your car or fine you heavily. That's also another significant issue that's not really affecting us normal road users, but does affect the stance community as a whole. And in terms of what the actual law says, there doesn't seem to be a consensus about the legality of stance cars. There are certain guidelines pertaining to how low your car can legally be and what modifications you absolutely cannot do to your car, but the National Road Traffic Act isn't really specific. It's very vague when it comes to how these rules are supposed to be enforced. So then you end up with a situation where these rules are kind of up for interpretation on the side of the traffic cops. They can decide that your car is too low. They can decide that your modifications are illegal. it's kind of like up for grabs. It's up to what the traffic cop is feeling that day, I guess. So then where does that leave us? On one hand, stance cars are an undeniable part of South African youth culture, a way to stand out, belong, and create something beautiful out of a everyday runabout. But on the other hand, they carry financial, legal, and social baggage that makes them very impractical in the bigger picture, which raises the final question that I want to pose in this video, which is, what is the actual legacy of stance cars in South Africa? If we're being honest, at the end of the day, stance cars just don't make sense on South African roads. I will say that clearly. I don't think that's controversial in any kind of way. If you think that's controversial, fight me in the comments. I don't care. That's the truth. Stance cars just don't make sense in the context of this country. They're expensive to run, they scrape everywhere, and the police are always looking for reasons to cause you pain when you drive one. But maybe practicality was never the point. I think stance is about taking a normal car and turning it into something more personal, a reflection of yourself, and a way of joining a community that speaks the same visual language. I think it's closer to an art form than it is a performance upgrade. And in that sense, stance cars in South Africa are both impractical and very useless, but also very, very important. Well, not very, very important. They're important. They're important also in their own way. And I say important because I think they show how far people are willing to go for their self-expression, even if it does not make sense to the rest of us. Stance cars don't make sense. The video's done now. That was the conclusion for the video. My personal opinion, these cars do not make sense, especially in my area. I see a lot of stance cars in my area, an area with a lot of dirt roads. Like the one outside of my window right now. A lot of dirt roads, a lot of potholes in the roads, very, very big speed humps. They don't make sense at all. But if that is what someone identifies with, if that is the culture that someone wants to partake in, who am I to judge, Chief? Tell her what you must do, whatever makes you happy at the end of the day. Right, yeah, that's it for the video. This was a bit of a different one. It was less academically heavy. I mean, it did get a bit heavy there with the psychology stuff, but otherwise, I think this one was a bit more chill than my regular uploads. But I still hope you guys enjoyed. I actually really enjoyed researching this video and getting into the psychology of stuff. I've never really gotten into psychology like that, and I'm excited to explore this field as we continue to create content. We are trying to get to 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so make sure you click that subscribe button, like the video if you liked it, click the like button, click the bell icon if you're already subscribed so that you're notified every time I post a banger of a video, like I'm sure this one was. But yeah, until the next one, goodbye.